What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 701. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how's the week been, man?
It's been good. It's hot. It's sunny. You know, getting some good outside time. The dog certainly appreciates it. Sun's out, guns out. Also, it's been cube season, so I've been capping off every evening with a nice cube, you know.
Going off. Man, I mentioned the stream last week, but really, like, this is some, like, vintage, like, not vintage cube, but like vintage Luis Scott-Vargas level streams. I mean, like, I actually messaged you about one of your streams a couple days ago where you were kind of going ham, and I was like, wow, you know, that was a really, you know, and I was like maybe halfway through it, and then it really went nuts on the late night one, the bad idea draft that you.
Oh, the bad idea drafts are always the best. It was a lot of fun, and then had a guest stream with BK, and then Patrick Sullivan was watching from home, and he lives like a mile away from me. So he's like, yo, can I come over? I'm like, dude, come on over. And it was great.
And that was the best one for me. Like, you guys with your stupid ponchos on and like forcing storm every time and stuff. And they kept getting better. But this last one was great. I always say it at the end of the show, but if you go to lrcast.com, I have links to all of our stuff right on the front, including Luis's stream if you want to catch it. And yeah, really great stuff, man. I'm going to be bummed when the vintage cube rolls away this time, just because I'm going to miss your stream and videos and such. At any rate, this week on the show, we talked about vintage cube a lot last week, but not this week. We're back talking about March of the Machine. We're going to kind of do a touch in with it, an update, you know, where are things at with the format, how is it going, and who better to guide that ship for us than our repeat guest, Sierkovitz. Welcome back on the show, Sierky. It's great to see you.
Oh, well, I thought we were going to review Stronghold. And Ben Sack is going to do the data. But okay, I mean, we can talk about MOM as well. Thanks for inviting me.
Wait, are you prepared to talk in depth about?
Who would do a worse job, your review of Stronghold or his review of the data?
At least I played Stronghold.
That's your answer.
I don't know. I think I would take TBS on this one. He would kill Stronghold, right? We know that. He probably knows everything about it. And I think he could definitely like pretend enough to talk about the data if he had access to it. Although I'm giving him extra credit there because he doesn't. So yeah, maybe not so much actually. He can't make it up based on nothing.
Everyone has access to 17 months data if they
true.
want to.
That's true. He hasn't reviewed it. He wasn't prepared.
But like the real data.
Wins.
You know what I mean.
The real data, not the one that we give to the people. No.
Right.
The propaganda. So yeah, we got Seirko on the show here this week for his appearance to talk about March of the Machine. We've got a few different things we're going to talk about with him. Big picture stuff, archetype level stuff, 5-color deck, and battles, right? One of the huge question marks that we had coming into this format was the new permanent type battle. And, you know, how would that play out? How has it changed limited? Are we going to be seeing these again? Do we want to see them again? We're going to talk about all of that on the show this week. Before we get started, I want to mention our patrons, everybody over at patreon.com/limited resources. Just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who signed up and who has supported us for all this time. It really means a lot to us. You know, we don't have a sponsor right now. So, you know, that's kind of the thing that's keeping the show going. And we really just appreciate everybody who does that. It's one of those weird things where, you know, this is the world we live in now where you can create something like this that can sustain itself in this way. And it's really beautiful, right? Because it's a small amount from each person and you don't need to get everybody, right? When you make a Patreon and you're trying to set up and you're trying to build an audience and do the thing, you know, you really only end up getting a few % of people that actually support you on there. It's usually 1, 2, maybe 3, you know, somewhere very, very small percentage of the total listener base will actually do it. And that's fine. That's what it's designed for. But some people think that you need 50% or some crazy amount, and you don't. You know, it's a relatively small amount of people that will support the whole thing. And yeah, you get some extra cool perks and stuff in there as well when you sign up. So it's patreon.com/limited resources, and mostly dope. Just want to say thanks to everybody who supports us there. Okay, I do have a Patreon question of the week, which is actually aimed at you, Luis. This one's a little bit narrow, but I want to widen it out to a slightly broader question. It says Andrew says, I would love to hear a deep dive of Luis's experiences, decisions, and lessons learned in limited tournaments. Now, he was actually referring not to the March of the Machine Pro Tour draft, Luis, but the one from your from the prior PT where you were a featured drafter. But he says, it seemed like a tough seat, and I enjoyed watching him turn lemons into lemonade. Is there anything he would have done differently looking back? And, you know, if I were to expand this out, you can talk about that draft if you'd like as well. But more in general, you know, what have been the decisions, lessons, possibly regrets, things like that you've done as you've been a featured drafter so many times, right? You probably hold the crown for that. And you've had more drafts seen by people than anybody in the world, guaranteed at you know, all the levels that you play at. What's that like for you, having, you know, that kind of magnifying glass on you all the time?
In terms of other people watching me, that doesn't really bother me. I think it's just been so long since that's even been something that I've thought about, because a lot of the Magic I play, it's in front of an audience, you know, and that's because I enjoy streaming. Before streaming was even something I did, I recorded videos. And then, of course, being a featured drafter at the Pro Tour. I always liked being a featured drafter, though. It always kind of felt like I was gonna get taken to task when Ben S was on our team, and afterwards he would love pulling up the draft viewer and just walking me through all the things I did wrong. But the cool thing about that is it made me better at limited. You know, that actually did get me to the place I wanted to go. And overall, I think some of the things I've really learned from this is, one is don't get too kind of pigeonholed into what you want to draft. One of the things I think anyone can probably sympathize with is when you draft a format a lot and you draft a deck a lot, sometimes you get to the point where it's hard for you to not draft that deck. When you're just like, I've drafted blue-black the last 7 drafts. Now I just see a mediocre blue common and I'm in. And you don't, I think, generally want to actually be that hard at forcing it. So, but sometimes you get into this mind space where it's hard for you to realize that that's what you're doing.
It's almost like you don't even see the other cards, right?
Right. You start to unconsciously weight cards of your preferred combination a lot higher than they should be. And that's something that can be dangerous to do. So honestly, the biggest thing, especially for people who have maybe not done a time draft, like let's say, and it comes up for people, right? You top 8 like an RCQ, so, you know, you play day 2 of a Grand Prix when those were there. Maybe you go to the Pro Tour and you play it. Is when you're under the camera or under the timing, not even a feature draft, you're just at the Pro Tour. Sometimes you're not sure between a couple cards. They say, all right, draft, and you just have to make a decision, and you just take a card. And sometimes it's not the card you at the end of the day wish you took, and I've definitely done that plenty of times myself.
Seirko, you ever drafted a time draft before?
Yeah, it's been a long time since I did it last time, so my advice might be a bit outdated. But I had several time drafts on GPs. I never drafted on the Pro Tour because the only Pro Tour I qualified wasn't constructed. Yay.
Oh, no.
And that also dates when you qualified.
Yeah.
It had to be pre-2009.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was 2001. It was Houston 2001, I think.
That was the one where Your Move Games finished first, second, third, I think, extended Pro Tour.
Yeah, it was extended. Yes, it was extended. I was clowned by Osip Lebedovic in the round 1 and then beat Patrick Chapin in the last round. So I didn't qualify for day 2 because 4-3 was not enough in those days. But in time drafts, I think that one thing to do is to really use your time efficiently. So I would say I usually made my decision relatively quickly within the first 10 seconds, and I spend the last whatever time is left in memorizing the cards that are in there and thinking if my choice was good and more reevaluating it rather than deciding. And of course, you can't do it on every pick. In some picks, you have a split-second decision, but then I just set aside 2 cards on the side. I know that these are between those 2. I look through the rest of the thing while keeping in mind how is my deck looking and memorizing what I'm taking. And you have to create that. Basically, you have to get maybe a couple of checkpoints that I always did for myself. Like, do I have enough early drops? Do I have enough interaction? Do I have enough things that matter in the longer game? And focus on those things, because you cannot memorize everything. So you have to maybe streamline your thought process in those things. That would be my advice.
Yeah, that's a really solid general approach. That's definitely how I do it as well. Thank you, Andrew, for the question and for your support on Patreon. All right, let's do some Crack-A-Packs. And Sierkovitz, as usual, we'll be looking for your thoughts on what you like out of these packs. And
I like this. I like the sound of it. That's
do you like it?
I like.
You're really missing. Oh yeah, that fresh pack smell. Can't beat it. Okay, our first card off is Searing Barb.
I know what it does. I don't know how it does it because I never played it, so I probably won't first pick it.
All right, so we're not taking that. How about a Forest Dispersal?
Oh yeah, that's put it on the maybe pile. I love that card.
Serpent
Certainly
Blade.
not a card you'd be thrilled to first pick, but I have first picked it before and likely do it again.
Yeah. Serpent Blade Assailant, that's the Death Touch backup creature.
Not sold on it. No, not at the first pick. I want to pick it maybe as pick like 8, 9, something.
12.
Yeah.
Okay, I got another in the maybe pile. How about Final Flourish?
That's definitely a maybe.
That's a definitely maybe.
Definite maybe, yeah.
Just for the record, Final Flourish or a Forest Dispersal?
I would pick Final Flourish.
You too, right, Luis?
Yeah, I think it's enough better that even though it's a slightly worse color, it's still a legit first pick.
Shatter the Source. This card saw a little more play than I thought it would, but that's the 5 and a red Convoke that does 6 damage to a creature, planeswalker, or battle, or you can destroy an artifact.
Yeah, this is the card that I would pick if I know what I already am in. When I'm maybe like a very controlling version of blue-red, then I'm interested in that thing and sit behind this and artistic refusals and have my 1/1s standing ready to be tapped for convoking. But that's not the thing that I want to start with it. I want to know that I'm in that deck, and also then it's not like my first priority there.
Luis, your opponent at the PT would have killed for this, right?
Oh man, the one who had 4 Rouse reinforcements, yeah.
And no Convoke cards. Arachnoid Adaptation. Where is this one falling for you, sir? Because I do remember this one overperforming a bit at the beginning of the format. I don't know where it's at now, though. And I've never prioritized it for what it's worth.
I would play it in like a white-green super aggressive deck.
Okay.
But I would still prefer to play Aerial Boost or the +1/+1 counter and protection spell over it. So it's not even like it's in top 3 of the tricks for that deck, but I still have 2 that are way better. And yeah.
So that means that it's not going to see that much play that often if it's going to get pushed out. What about Cut Short?
Yeah, it's another thing that I want to already know that I'm in this deck. So first of all, this card terribly aligns, which we're going to talk about it later, but generally white decks don't want to play a long game in this format. And Cut Short is more like a controlling kind of a card. So I would be maybe happy to play it if I have some kind of a weird Jeskai control where white is only for things like Cut Short and they can be also convoked. That would be happy. I would be happy picking it, but obviously not first picking it.
Yeah, that's how I feel like when I look at this card. That's a fine Magic card, right? It's a very playable card. Totally. It's a good thing. It just doesn't have a solid home in the format. Like the fact that it's white and white wants to be aggressive kind of pushes it.
It's the sort of curse of Feed the Serpent. When Feed the Serpent was a great card on paper, but in Kaldheim it just didn't align with what Black was doing, and it turned out to have like middling win rate.
Yeah, those are the cards that are hardest to judge, like during the set review. You know, because we attempt to contextualize them to the extent that we can, but of course we can't fully because we haven't played the set yet, right? So it's a lot of theory, and it, of course, you know, we heavily lean on what is this card's power level in a vacuum, and it's only when you get to play for a little while that you start to go, you know, Cut Short just isn't fitting, right? That there isn't a home for it. There, even one of the white sub archetypes, you know, like you said, you have to get into something weird. Like a controlling Jeskai deck, which isn't something that you see commonly in the format. And now you're like, okay, yeah, there it is.
I had a blue-white deck that had a transcendent message, the blue draw X convoke card, and like an artistic refusal. And I played 2 cut shorts. I had Wrath. Like I've actually had a couple decks like that. Only one actually ended up with cut short, but I found that Wrath plus a bunch of good controlling spells can be a decent deck. But the average blue-white Knights deck, it doesn't love having a cut short. It's kind of the card I'd like to sideboard in if I knew that I was playing against another deck that's kind of trying to race me. But when you're the aggressor, yeah, clearly the card isn't like fantastic.
Yeah. If they're playing red-green, sure. I'll cut it short. Infected Defector, cool name. Not a great card.
It's like a, what was the 7/6 worm from the olden days for 7 mana? That's basically it.
For Scaled Worm.
Yeah, Scaled Worm. For 7 mana, you get 7/6 of stats, but split over 2 bodies in this case. That's not good enough.
Luis, that reminds me. It's probably time, right?
For a little LSV?
I think so, right? Like I totally got it. We maybe overdid it, but we're probably gonna have to bust one of those back.
I was actually thinking the same thing the other day.
I mean, he just like Scaled Worm. Like Seirko's like, oh yeah, I qualified for this PT this one time. And Luis is like, oh yeah, I know the format, who finished first, second, third, where it was. Like what the, like we gotta keep that mind sharp of yours. We might have to bust that out. Do you even know what we're talking about, Seirko?
No, I'm sitting here completely oblivious.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It's just like you were drafting.
Yeah. When you figure out what that means, Seirko, you let me know. Tiller of Flesh is next. This is our first uncommon.
Yeah, and it doesn't go on the maybe pile.
No. This card is really disappointing because it looks like a cool build around. You can use removal or pump spells. And it's like, well, I think they needed to be Incubate 3 is what I think that they needed to be.
Push it a little bit harder. Yeah, that one again. Also, it looks like they tried to thread the needle on this. Like it is a knight, right? And like, so you're like, okay, but it's a 2-powered 4-drop, right? It's just like, ugh. It could be a 2/10, and you still might be like, eh.
But if white decks would be like going long and playing like those 12-turn games, that card would have been probably acceptable.
Definitely.
But as we're going to see later, they are just not. They just want to finish the game by turn 7, and then how many spells can you target something with?
Right.
And if you even manage to do it, then you put yourself in a position when the rest of your cards are just outcompeted by that stage by other colors, and you're going to lose that game, even though you made a couple of 2/2s. Yeah,
that is true. Because what you hope for with a card like this is that you're willing to pay the upfront cost of a understated 4-drop for the benefit of, well, I was just going to do this other stuff anyway. Like this isn't a build around in the sense of like you have to include cards into your deck that you wouldn't have normally. You get to just play your good combat tricks, play all your removal spells, and Tiller is supposed to slot into that. But as you said, it doesn't actually play out.
You can imagine if it was the only change in this card would be changing white mana symbol to black mana symbol, and that card would have been much better in this format.
For sure. I love this next card. We might need a new award, Luis, for the Sunset, the warm, fuzzy feeling card. The one that is like it's Tangled Skyline.
Oh yeah. How did I know that this is going to be this card? That goes on the maybe pile, but very quickly also.
Yeah. I mean, that 5 life, it's like nothing can go wrong. I'm fine. And then I have a bunch of reach creatures. You can't kill me. Sometimes you do die after casting Tangled Skyline, but admittedly it is difficult. Like, and of course, for 5-color aficionados like myself, a card like this goes a very long way.
Oh, or for Omen Hawker aficionados like I am.
Next one is Phyrexian Awakening. That's the 2 and a white, and you incubate 4, and Phyrexian, and it's an enchantment, and Phyrexians have vigilance, and yeah, I mean, it feels like this maybe stole an incubate counter from Tiller of Flesh. It's like, this one could have been 3 and still been pretty good, but it's 4.
Yeah. I mean, none of these cards beat out Final Flourish for me, at least. But this Phyrexian Awakening, I think, is the first one that I'd be a little more inclined to. I just don't really think you should start a draft by taking green cards in general.
I see. What do you think about that, Sirki?
I have another problem with it. I just like whenever I draft white decks, this card is too slow for them. So that's my problem with this card. Like I had maybe one blue-white deck when I went pretty deep into transforming cards when this one would have been great, but it had like 2 Norns Inquisitors, and that of course improves how it works, and it had a bit of more staying power. But most of the white decks that I will be drafting are going to be, faster than that. As ridiculous as it sounds, and also it like doesn't contribute to the knight synergies if I play knights. Maybe in like a white-green aggro, it would be fine. I would probably still be on the final flourish, to be fair, because
because you're a responsible adult. That's why. Our second to last uncommon, as it turns out, is Invasion of Asgol, which is the black-red for defense invasion, and when ETBs, target player sacks a creature or planeswalker and loses a life, and it turns into a 2/1 with menace and another ability.
That's what I want to wheel from this pack, but after picking the final flourish.
Oh, okay. So do you like this card?
I do like it. I do like it quite a lot.
And Luis, I remember
it's one of the better battles in general.
Yeah, and Luis, I remember you were liking it. Like after initially we were both like, medium, but you actually came around on it too. I remember in the middle of the format. Where are you at on it now?
I'm pretty high on it.
Yeah.
For 2 mana, you trade for a card, and then you're left with like something that's worth between a half a card and a whole card, depending on how good you are at doing the thing.
Mm-hmm. And these colors are pretty good at transforming battles, right?
Yeah. So. And it's black red especially. The 2 mana battles are just really nice.
Yeah, they really are. That perhaps obviously, but those ended up being highlights. Our last uncommon is Renata, Called to the Hunt. This is, of course, also our multiverse legend. That's the 2/GG star 3, and her power is equal to devotion to green. But more importantly, each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it.
Never.
Yeah, not good.
Both of them off of it. Okay. And our rare, I only got a good one. It's Ayara, Widow of the Realm. That's the 1 black 3/3. Tap it, sacrifice a creature or artifact, and have it do X damage target opponent or battle, and you gain X life, where X is the mana value of that permanent, and you can pay 5 and a Phyrexian red to transform at sorcery speed into Ayara Furnace Queen, which is a 4/4 that lets you get a creature back from your yard or artifact back from your yard at the beginning of combat on your turn. It gets haste, and then you exile it at your end step. Is this better than File Flourish?
No, not in my opinion.
What do you think?
This is the card that kills me with the regularity that is scary, and I never managed to make it work even in the slightest, because it always eats the removal instantly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not like you have to go really far out of your way to make this card a good card in your deck, but I agree that a lot of the times that you play the card, your opponent's going to kill it.
Removal's good enough in the set that your 3-mana, you're somewhat tricky to cast. 1 black 3-mana 3/3 is just going to be that too often for you to not want to take something a little more in demand, like a premium removal spell like Flourish. Is that fair?
Yeah. Basically, Final Flourish is always good, and Ayara is sometimes good. And there's a pretty meaningful difference there.
It does have a much better ceiling, because against some decks, when they have this blue-green with maybe some bounce interaction, that card is going to take over the game at some stage because they can't do anything meaningful against it. But also against some decks, it's just going to be 3/3 chump blocker vanilla, basically, because you're so far behind that before you start doing the shenanigans, you'll be dead. And Final Flourish could have stopped that from happening. So,
yeah, and it's important to note that while the ceiling is much higher on Ayara, she does have the particular type of cost that is compounded when you're behind, right? When you have to sacrifice another creature, you're giving up board presence for life total in this case. And that is a transaction that you would almost always take in reverse if given the opportunity. You would almost always, give your opponent life or have you lose life or some combination of those to get yourself board presence, whether you're behind, whether you're trying to finish out the game. And this is asking you to do the opposite. And that's a lot. You can take over with it, but if you're behind, this thing is not saving you. right? Like this is not the card. You can't start giving up board presence and thinking that you're going to come back and win the game. So I think that that's kind of the tiebreaker. I love Tangled Skyline. Like it's actually close for me between that and Final Flourish. Obviously, I know that Final Flourish is going to perform more consistently and better, but man, Skyline has done serious work for me in the ramp decks that I like to draft. So if I, had my eye on one of those draft decks, I might just take the Skyline. If I'm at the PT, I'm just taking Final Flourish though. Like no question.
Yeah, you'll get so many good 5-drops in this format, and there's so little cheap.
Yeah, but they don't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, dude. Gain 5 life and a reach creature, like you had me, right? Like I'd pay 20 mana for that.
What if I said it will wheel?
Oh, that would be the dream. Yes. All right, let's do another Crack-a-Pack. Keep this train rolling. Okay, our first card off. Oh, I like this one. Meeting of Minds. Maybe pile?
I mean, I wouldn't put it on a maybe pile in the first pick. I mean, I'm happy drafting that card, but I might be slightly lower. That's why I never managed to get them. But,
Luis, this guy came on our show and refused to put a playable divination on the maybe pile. Like, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah, that's tough.
Is he right?
I'll get my code.
Yeah.
Is he right? I don't know how strong of an endorsement the maybe pile is. I'd have to know more about the maybe pile, I guess.
Okay. Luis is going to sidestep that question like a true politician. All right. I want to know you guys' thoughts on this one because I have never come around on it being a card that I actively want in my deck, but I have seen people play it and it seemed to be fine. And it's Seed of Hope.
That's
Green.
That's actually one of the cards when we're going to talk about 5-color decks. It's good in some very small subset of decks that have a bunch of permanents, want to gain life, and want to play a longer game.
Okay. And, I tend to play those decks. I just don't play this card, and maybe I'm missing out.
So just to give you the number that I learned by heart, if you have 6 other non-permanent spells in your deck, you have still 98% chance of getting a permanent out of it.
If you only have 6?
If you have 6 other non-permanent things in your deck.
Gotcha.
Which is okay. I mean, I think that in lots of decks, because if you have battles, because you have, lands are already going to be 17 of your cards, you have a decent chance of hitting something. And in most cases, you actually have some selection of what you're going to pick. And maybe in the later game, it will be sort of like cycling draw to gain 2 life, which is not terrible at all.
But I mean, Preordained Gain 2 is a tremendously powerful card for 1 mana.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, if you can get it close to that, I think it's well worth playing. Obviously, the card is tricky because more copies of it make itself weaker. It won't always get the cards you want, right? But especially when a lot of your best cards tend to be permanents, then yeah, the card ends up working out pretty nicely.
Yeah, you can sort of count it. If you're playing like this deck that wants to have a lot of lands and wants to play them, you can count this card as your 17.5 land. Sort of.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Gain to life is something like super important in those decks as well.
Do I cut lands if I play? Like, do I get to replace? Like, that's going the wrong direction, right?
Yeah, I think that I would rather put it as a 17.5 land in a deck that is mana hungry than to play it as instead of the 17th land, because you might just not hit enough land drops if you miss on it.
Do you guys ever play this card for real? Like, is this card in your decks?
Yeah.
What about you, Luis?
Seed of Hope? Yeah.
Yeah.
The 5-color green decks or multicolor green decks that have a lot of early green sources tend to have a lot of like battles or legends that are all permanents, need the life cushion. All of that added together, I think, does make this pretty good.
Okay. I never play it. I guess I should. Ichor Shade? No. Onaki Javelineer? No.
Prefer not to.
Kithkin Billy Rider? No.
Also prefer not to.
Hey, the maybe pile is looking real empty right now. Oculus Whelp?
Wait a second. I'm putting that meeting of minds in the maybe pile.
All right. I'll move it over. It got upgraded after our first 7 cards. Oculus Nope is more like it. Kite Sail? No. Wow, those were our commons? They were horrible. Let's see if we can improve. Actually, wait. I've got a foil common here. And I have a common land, so we're not done yet. Foil common, Cosmic Hunger. No.
I would take Meeting of the Minds over Cosmic Hunger at this point.
You too, Sierko?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
What about a dual land, Rugged Highlands?
I wouldn't first pick it.
No.
Neither. All right. So our commons were trash. Let's see if we can improve. First up is Completed Huntmaster. That's the 2 and a black, 2/3. You can pay 1 mana tap, sack another creature, and you can pay 3.
That's an interesting card. I mean, again, you should get it. You should get those cards later a bit, but
has anybody ever actually activated this card in the history of the format?
Oh yeah,
okay.
You can do so many things you can do with it.
Would you take it over Meeting of Minds?
Probably not.
Wouldn't either.
Even close.
All right, here's the most talked about card from the PT, Luis. It's Artistic Refusal. The amazing on Arena, not so good when your opponents know what's going on.
Well, that was one of the benefits of doing some house testing, watching the folks draft, because you come to the conclusion that Artistic Refusal when you're playing against Pro Tour players is just not as good.
Much more face up.
As it'll be on Arena. Arena Best of One, especially where you're not playing against someone who any of the contents of their deck or anything that's going on. And at the end of the day, I just don't think Artistic Refusal I don't think it's a bad card. Obviously it's still a good card, but when you play against people who will play around it, you lose a pretty fair amount of ground there.
Yeah, I guess the question I would have is how good do you have it versus how much do you adjust it down against, competent players? Is it a B and it becomes a C?
No, I have it at B+ to start with, and it becomes a B-. Okay. Where I remember this from a practice draft. Reed asked me, during the draft, because we just talked during our drafts and stuff, and I wasn't drafting. And he's like, come here. He's got a blue-black start of a good blue-black control deck with a good rare. I think it was Battle Fiora. And he's like, should I take Artistic Refusal or should I take Ifaro's Dispersal? And I said you should take the Dispersal, even though I think most of the blue-black decks I've had would prefer to have Artistic Refusal, because when you pass with 2 creatures and 4 lands up, your opponent at the Pro Tour is not just going to play their most expensive spell.
Yeah. I guess the counter argument is just that it is just raw power. Also, you don't have to counter something to get value out of it. Even, if your opponent's just going to, if they're ahead and also won't play into it, you can just fire it off if you need to and get your cards.
Yeah, I'm not saying the card is bad. I would still put the card in my deck, but I don't think that the card is as high of a pick as it would be normally. I would adjust it downward.
What do you think, Sierko?
I mean, it's still the best thing that we've seen so far by quite a lot, I think.
Totally. I have no debate there. I'm just
I was talking more generally, yeah.
And I think the same holds true for day 2 of an Arena Open. I think you can go a little bit deeper in those games and in those matches than you would in a normal Arena game.
Yeah, and obviously the higher the opposition, the less useful combat tricks become, the less useful counter spells become, because people know how to play around them.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I'm sure that Luis can just sniff out Artistic Refusal from a miles out when the opponent just.
Oh, I'm allergic to getting my spells countered by it. I'll jump through some pretty big hoops to avoid that if I can. You can't always. Sometimes your opponent plays with a card face up, and you just have to walk into it because your hand is all sorcery spells that cost 4 or more mana. Taking a turn off just means they'll counter to the next one, and you'll still lose. So that doesn't help. But given the option, you're going to find people are able to play around this card a decent amount. It does still cost 6 mana even with Convoke.
Yeah. Paretic Prankster. That's the 2/1 for 1 and a red, and it turns into the 3/2 that when it dies, they have to sack a creature.
Isn't that common?
Oh, it is. Oh, it's because it's double-faced.
Yeah, it's one of the double-faced.
My mistake. Yeah. What do we think about it?
Still no, though.
Okay, not going to make the maybe pile. Oh, my old friend. Invasion of Zendikar. The card I need to see. The unlocker of all things great. I'm putting it in the maybe pile, and I don't care what you guys say.
I think probably worse than Blighted Burgeoning.
What do you think, Luis?
Yeah, not a big fan, honestly.
We don't have a Blighted Burgeoning though.
I know, but I mean, just like to give you my idea of the power level of the card.
That's ridiculous. It's an A-. It lets you cast all your other insanely powerful things. If you don't have it, you can't play 5 colors.
You can if you have Blighted Burgeonings.
Yeah, well, I don't. Pack one, pick one, baby. 2 rares. You guys want the good one or the bad one first?
The bad one.
Bad one is Taigam Ojutai Master.
Yeah, that's bad.
The good one,
as you pre-announced, it's
the good one is Archpriest of Shadows. Boom!
Oh, yeah, that is a good one.
That is a good one.
Did you know that Invasion of Zendikar guarantees a turn 5 Archpriest? Yeah, you guys didn't think of that, did you?
So that's
with nothing to put the counter on, no creatures in the graveyard,
but just a battle to attack.
5 mana, 5/5, no text.
Yeah, 4/4. You can put it somewhere, right? You could have a 1-drop, 2-drop. We're obviously taking Archpriest of Shadows, right? This is it? A top 10 rare in the set?
And we're hoping to wheel.
Not quite, but still pretty high up there. Like you're not passing this card very often.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would slam it, and I'd be so sad because somebody's taking my invasion for sure.
You see, and then when you have the Archpriest, then you want to play your Seeds of Hope.
Just because you have a super powerful permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Because you were going to
off the graveyard.
You're going to have something in your graveyard when you play.
Oh, right, because it does mill for 2, doesn't it? Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm in. Wheel the Seeds and take the Archpriest. All right, let's talk about big picture archetype stuff to kick it off, Seirko. It shifts.
It does
over time, it turns out.
It's like there are several reasons why the power level shifts over time. Like, first thing is obviously people learn how to build more streamlined decks, and it varies from format to format. In some formats, aggro decks are very easy to build, and then they are winning in the beginning, and then people learn how to build more complicated strategies, and they tend to be winning later because you know what cards to avoid, which cards to prioritize. But also, obviously, you can look at the 17 lands data, and how people pick cards changes over time. And those changes look like very subtle, because if you look at the current set, you probably see that Preening Champion is now picked maybe like half a pick, 1 pick later, earlier than it was in the beginning. But because it sort of goes with multiple cards, it all of a sudden becomes that instead of being almost guaranteed to have like 35 good playables in blue-black in your deck, and then you can trim a lot of them and still end up with a busted version, now you're basically looking at, I will only see 21 cards, and then I have to play mediocre playables, and I will not have like 3 FRS Dispersal and 2 Deadly Derisions in my deck, and then Halo Forager and 2 Invasions of Amonkhet. Those decks are gone. And when you don't have those decks, the blue-black becomes slightly worse because obviously the power level of the deck is going to be lower. And also people know how to play against it. And that also because that's the deck that they practice the most against. So there's like plenty of small things that make the metagame change. And I was actually looking at the win rate of the last week, and compared to the early format, was blue-black was the most winning deck by quite a large margin. If you look at it right now from the last week in Best of 1 on Arena, it has 4th best win rate of all the color pairs. And it's behind white-blue, which is by far the strongest deck right now. And then you have like Selesnya and Izzet that are slightly over Dimir. They're really close to each other, so you can't really say that one is stronger than the other. But I think especially Selesnya is not the deck that people were thinking can be strong. But I was observing this data week after week for my own personal amusement, and I've seen Selesnya climbing slightly. And then when I actually looked at the data surrounding battles that we're going to talk later, I noticed that Selesnya decks that don't have any battles in them are actually the second most winning archetype, and I think that trend continued. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. But specifically ones that didn't have battles.
The green-white decks, the fewer battles, the higher the win rate. That was the general trend in those. But yeah, I mean, this is the point maybe to make later when we talk about battles. But generally right now, when you look at the top 5 archetypes, all 5 colors are present in those. You can draft Izzet, no problem. You can get a good deck out of it. You can draft Selesnya, you can get a decent deck out of it. And Dimir is still quite strong. And actually, when you look at this format, apart from Azorius winning quite a lot more than anything else, and Orzo being slightly behind on everything else, all the other 8 archetypes are within 2 percentage points from each other. So I think that one of the nicest thing about this format is you don't have to stuck on the idea of what is the best archetype. You can just find your open seat and then draft a deck. If you understand how it should function, you should be fine. It's
another compliment for this format for sure.
Oh, yeah, I have plenty of them. That format is just fantastic.
It's a great format.
What are the top 5 archetypes right now? Do you know that?
So yeah, by win rate, Azorius, Selesnya, Izzet, Dimir, and Golgari-ish, but Rakdos is almost the same. The differences are just so small between those that and again, I mean, are they the strongest? The variance of the data will probably cover most of it. So I would say Azorius is the strongest archetype. It has several very powerful builds that probably can service a couple of people on the pod. Aerial Boost is still a criminally underdrafted card. That thing is just so powerful, and you still see it wheel. Marshal of Zalfir, the good one. Mm-hmm. That card is still going super late because if there is no one drafting white-black on the pod, somehow people don't want to get into it. And there's plenty of sub builds when you can go like 1-drops and Halo Frog kind of builds of white, blue. If you don't have enough knights, you can do the knight one. I built one with like Omen Hawker and a bunch of flip cards and Norn's Inquisitors that also was pretty successful. So you can build it in many ways. All of them should be sort of like aggro tempo kind of strategy. So yeah, there's so much power in that. I still have no idea how to build Selesnya. I see it's the second most winning archetype, but I tried several versions and they were all fine. All I know is you don't want to put battles in them. You just want to play good old no frills aggro, maybe with a couple of white bombs that you can utilize efficiently in that archetype.
Should we talk?
Yeah. And Izzet is just, you can build a very, very aggressive Izzet, the one that you just churn out like 6 1/1 creatures and then play City on Fire or something like that. Or you can play more controlling version when you still put those 1/1s, but then you start countering things with Artistic Refusal, killing things with Shatter the Source, and maybe bouncing something and slowly accruing value and winning through that.
We should. You've mentioned the battles thing a couple of times, but there's a we're going to talk about battles in depth, but you pointed me to a graph in. Is this your latest article, the battles one?
No, that's from 2 weeks ago, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
So you did a graph near the end that's under the heading Game Length and Battles.
Game Length and Battles. Oh, yeah.
And this is really interesting to me because you mapped out the game length in turns.
Yeah.
Where it starts with 1 and ends at 16. So this is marking the turn at which the game ends. And then you went by each of the 2 color pairs. And for each slot, you put the win percent of that turn.
Yeah, so that means if I have the game ended at turn 6 and I have the white-blue deck and then I have the win rate in that square, it means that what percentage of the games does blue-white win if the game ends at that particular turn.
Uh-huh. And so that, I find that you also did a nice job with kind of color coding the squares, right? Where like the warmer, redder, deeper color towards the red spectrum ones are the ones where it's really kind of hitting its note. And then the cooler, bluer colors are the ones where it's like, that doesn't happen that often, right? So it gives you a snapshot of when these archetypes are winning and what their sweet spot is as far as when that happens. And it's very eye-opening. I have to say, looking at this and kind of just being able to just process this one archetype at a time, you can kind of visualize like a curve, right? Where like, if I pick a deck, let's say, what's a good one that shows what I'm showing here? Well, blue-white is actually a good one to show it, right? Which is when the game ends on turn 4, blue-white has a 63.4%. And that's, by the way, the only deck that even has turn 4 wins on here. So
and that's obviously just a concession to 4 knights in play or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. But then on turn 5, it goes to 65.9. And then turn 6, it's 68.3. Turn 7, it's 66.7. So you see it peaked on turn 6. And by turn 8, it's back down to 61%. So we started at 63%. We went up to 68. And then by turn 8, we're back down to 61. And then it continues to trail off. 56, 52, 47, 45, 45, 45, 46. Okay. And that takes us out to turn 15. So in my mind, I can picture a little curve, right? And it peaks very early for this one. And then it has a long tail that kind of goes steadily down where the deck is performing much, much worse. And, for me, when I look at this, I can take a lot from that, even if I haven't played the format that much, right? This is clearly an assertive, aggressive deck that wants to get the game done as early as possible. And it's very good at doing so. Like when the game at 68, 66, 65 on the 5, 6, and 7 turns, I mean, that's some smashing.
Yeah, so the only drawback of this graph is it doesn't show the incidence of how frequently do those games end on those particular turns.
Right.
Because, of course, yes, if you win 70% of your games on turn 5, but you win like 1% of your games on turn 5, that's not very useful statistic. I tried to take the ones that or had like a large sample size, which means that it does happen at least sometime.
Yeah.
But I think that, especially with the white-blue, listeners that play Best of One in Arena will have that experience that sometimes they have this white-blue deck, and they are like so much ahead, and then the opponent stabilizes, and they are just like, well, maybe, and then they stabilize a bit more, and they, now I need my aerial boost or I'm dead. And then you have like those 3 turns to draw the aerial boost, and if you draw them, that's your 45% win rate on those late turns. And if you don't draw it, you just lost, because it's like the finish line gets further away, and you hit this brick wall, and you can't do anything. And I think that that's what the data shows, that basically if you don't win by turn 8, and in other white decks by turn 7 even, it just drops off very steeply. Your chances of winning are dropping because those decks just run out of steam. The things that opponents do on those turns 8, 9, and 10 are just so much more powerful than what you can offer. What you can offer is that very good early game, 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, Protocol Knight, and the game is over. And then, or maybe 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, pacifism on something, and then aerial boost on the thing, and swing for lethal. So that's the kind of.
And of course, I'll have a link to all the stuff that we're referencing here, the articles from Seirko in the show notes, if you want to check it out yourself. But, another, like just taking a snapshot of it, if I look at the decks that perform well on games that end on turn 5, 6, and 7, and I don't look at the archetypes, I just look at the numbers and go, okay, this one, and it looks like there's about 4 decks that, that stand out as being decent at those. The 3 top ones are blue-white, white-green, and white-red. So there's your white decks. And then, with a little bit of a nod there's red-green that's at least in the ballpark, but it's lower. And then interestingly, you might be thinking, well, what about white-black? Like, why is that white? Well, that one barely gets to get above 50% at any point on the curve. So it's kind of just bad in general. But all the other ones, red, green, lower level, but the high level ones are all white, right? And, one of your points, right, of putting this into the article here with respect to battles were that you don't want to play them in white very often.
No, there's like and so basically I first did the similar graph with the number of battles in the deck, and then I saw this trend of white blue has 60% win rate when there's 0 battles in the deck, and then it drops to 52% when there's 4 battles. And white green the same, 58% win rate when there's 0 battles, and when with 2 battles it already drops to 54 and then 51 when you have 4 battles. So I saw that steep drop, and I was trying to explore why is that, and then basically I tried to look at the game duration, because I had an early data that also showed that the more battles you have in your deck, the longer it takes you to win, and also the more battles you have in your deck, the quicker are your losses. The impact of battles on your deck is that it takes you a bit longer to win, because of course you attack the battle that gains opponent a couple of life. And also if you have battles, very often you will play those battles that impact the board in some way, but not as well as a creature would in a particular situation. And because of that, you're going to lose some games very quickly, because you play like 3 battles and nothing else, and they just overrun you with the 2/2s, and that's enough. So there's this like problem in how many battles to put and in which deck to play them. And I tried to explore whether some color combinations are just naturally not good in playing battles because it goes against their plan. And then I decided to test the game length, and it actually very well fits with what I was speculating. So basically white wants to kill early, and if you want to kill early, you probably don't want to play too many battles, if any at all.
Luis, how does this stand out to you? We had big questions coming in about battles, and this was one of them, right? Would it actually be worth it in a deck that was looking to get the opponent dead quickly to take the resources and life total and everything away from the player and focus it on a battle to ostensibly get further ahead on board and then capitalize on the win later? It looks like no. Like you should just kill your opponent if possible.
It depends on the deck. Certainly in the decks we're talking about, the white, blue, white, green style decks, I think battle is part of the reason that something like blue, black is so successful, honestly, is that when you're playing blue, black, you don't even care about attacking their life total that much. Like you typically have a good long game. And so being able to attack a battle for 4 and effectively draw a card off that, it turns that 4 damage, which would have been of moderate value to you before, to something really valuable.
Yeah, I should have framed it better. I did mean specifically for aggressive decks.
Yes, I think for aggressive decks specifically, attacking battles is a bit of a trap.
Okay. And then, go ahead, Seirko.
I think that especially in white blue, there is one particular exception to that rule, and that's the invasion of Kobakan, which is actually great.
Yes, that card is good.
Which one is that one again?
That's the one that
you elite spellbinder them, and then get the enchantment that pumps all your creatures that attacked.
Sorry, I forgot we're doing the LSV.
Oh, look at this. See if he remembered or found out somehow.
I didn't find out, but I'm playing along with it, and I think I figure out more or less what it means without knowing specifics.
Yeah. Wow. You just figured. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, it stands for Let's Stump Vargas in this context. So that to me is really interesting, because when they came up with a new permanent type, there's always the risk, and I don't know if risk is the right word, but there's the factor that they have to consider that it may benefit certain play styles or archetypes or types of deck more than others, right? And in this case, they may, if they want to go back to battle someday, which I'm assuming they will, that, it could be weird for them to say, okay, well, they weren't really great for the aggro decks. In fact, if we look at the numbers, they may have been better off just skipping battles altogether. And that doesn't feel great for a format, right? To have this flashy new permanent type and kind of incentivize your player base to just ignore it. But sometimes we've seen them overreact, right? Where all of a sudden they're like, all right, well, we'll give you an aggro battle that you're not going to forget anytime soon. And, all of a sudden people start pushing those boundaries. And it is also interesting to note, because Luis, you started to walk down this road when I kind of poorly framed that question for you there, but you're totally right. If I look at the opposite end of the spectrum, so blue-white being the most aggressive deck, there's one deck out of all the rest that actually get better the longer the game goes. So blue-black at the early stages is down in the low 50s or even below 50. So 51, 48, 51. But then when you get to turn 8, it's 55. Then turn 9 is 58. Turn 10 is 59. Turn 11 is 61. And then it levels off to about 60 through the rest of the turns, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. None of the other decks do that. None of them are even in the positive past 12, 13, past turn 13. There's only a couple decks that are even above 50% at all. And none of them are in the, like, I'm happy about it range where you're like getting into that 60% range where you're quite happy. So that to me, you know, really stands out as well, Seirko, as, you know, blue-black is the deck that really just wants the game to go long.
Yeah, I mean, mind that this is only based on the 2-color combinations. I'm pretty sure that some of the 5-color and 4-color concoctions are going to have similar numbers, not as high because their win rate is just lower because they are 4 colors and we pay the price for that, as we will reach at some stage. But blue-black is definitely the deck that wants to play long. It also copes pretty well with the number of battles in the deck because, as I told you, that white-blue drops from 60% win rate to 52 between 0 and 4 battles sort of linearly. Blue-black is like 56 when you have no battles, 57 when you have 1, 57 when you have 2, 58 when you have 3, 56.5 when you have 4. So it stays more or less stable. And you can see the same for all the Sultai colors. Like blue-green is not as strong as a color, but it has roughly 55% average independently of how many battles you're playing. And black-green, same, around 55 independently of the number of battles. When all the white decks, you see this very steep decline, the more battles you play, the fewer games you win, except for white-black, which doesn't have that upside.
Do you like battles?
I love them. I think it's a great mechanic. I actually think that the design team nailed it because you don't want them to like dominate the. You don't want it to be the only thing that you want to be doing in the new format, especially when it's a new card type. They're still strong and they present you with very interesting play patterns. And there's a bunch of them that is undervalued, like the Asgul that we mentioned during the Cracker Pack. I think that the Invasion of Pyrulia is a very underrated one.
That card's fantastic.
We love that card.
I love it. Actually, the Invasion of Kaladesh, I think, is one of the underrated in the right deck. It can be really atrocious when you play it. And a bunch of them are just highly overrated by people. Like I think Invasion of Lorwyn is my pet card that has perennially very bad win rate and is played by people because it's a removalistic.
6 mana sorcery kills something that sometimes gets you an 8/8 or whatever, but you had to do a bunch of work.
Yeah, we all agree.
It's a 6 mana kill something, unless it's a Glissa, which always seems to be the only target that I want to kill.
Yeah, and you can't. That does happen every once in a while.
But, I mean, the point is that it's a very interesting thing, and I think that part of battles not being so good for winning in this format is also because we're still learning how to use them properly. Because there is no data, no heuristic, no idea how to play with those things. And I think that this is a great puzzle in its own right. And I'd rather have them on a medium power level than to have them super busted and then people complaining that they are too busted. Imagine if every battle would be like Invasion of Amonkhet. It would be just unbearable playing the format because you just like open the pack, you look at the battle, you pick it, and you just ignore the rest of the pack.
Do you think we have a heuristic now based on what we've just talked about? Like if let's say that there's a set coming out this fall and it's going to have battles again. Would you go into it assuming from a heuristic perspective that, aggro decks will be less interested in battles and more controlling / mid-range decks will be more?
I don't think so, because I think that I trust Dave Humphries. If he's going to be in charge of that set, the battles are going to be tuned up for the aggressive decks because they will learn from that situation. They know which battles are good in aggressive decks, and they will try to put more of that effects into their set. Also, I think maybe they were on purpose tuned down for aggro because they wanted maybe slightly longer games for the set that wants to showcase the battles. I'm assuming we're not going to get another set when there's 36 of them. We're going to have sets when there is 6 6, maybe like a set of uncommon ones, 5 uncommon ones in each color, and then maybe like a couple of rares and a couple of mythics to pepper up. Also, right now we have the battle siege, but there's potential for other types of battles. So we might see completely different mechanic, maybe some kind of aggro-tuned ones when there's going to be not... it's not going to be when you need to attack it down, but maybe if opponent doesn't attack you for a turn, you remove a counter from the battle. And that will promote aggro decks because you play this battle, you push the damage, and they have a choice. Either I'm attacking back and not leaving blockers, or I'm having another thing to deal with. So, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I was relieved that they played it safe because, I mean, they probably had a pretty obvious scenario where they're like, well, the aggro decks are going to be better at flipping these than the non. Like they're just on board more. They have more combat tricks. So we can't make these trivially easy to flip and then also just jump your win percentage for doing so, right? So they probably just dialed that down. And that's fine. I mean, every mechanic that they come out with, every new card type they come out with isn't going to be exactly as good in all, archetypes and all styles of play. Luis, where are you at on battles? We've had them for a while now. We've got some data coming in. We've got some info. You want to see them again?
Oh, I'd love to. I think that they do play really well. They are largely well designed, and I agree with Seirko's take that because they're so obviously good in battles in aggro decks, they didn't want to lead to this snowballing effect. Because if you had too many games where opponent goes creature battle, put a free 4/4 into play plus the effect of the battle, you would end up in a spot that you would lose pretty badly 2 battles, and I don't think that's necessarily the place to start when you're trying to showcase a new mechanic.
Yeah, I would like to see them again as well. To me, these type of permanents are the real sweet spot. When they change gameplay, like I like the evolution I'm seeing. I know that these aren't the same exact thing, but I see a through line with Planeswalkers, which especially for limited, but you could even make an argument outside of it, were too untouchable and the mini game was too polarized where it was like, well, you need to attack this Planeswalker or you're going to lose. But it was like, you have to be able to cleanly attack into that Planeswalker or you're going to lose too quickly. And then we saw sagas come. And they felt like a much more balanced version of a Planeswalker. You don't get a choice. You're only getting 3 things. They're powerful. They're good things, but then it will disappear and that problem is over. But the one downside to them is that they're not interactable, right? That they're like, it's difficult to enchantment's probably the hardest permanent type to kill, especially in limited. So for the most part, if you resolved one, it was like, well, you're on this train and you're getting these 3 things. And, if they're too powerful, then you're going to run away with the game. And if they're balanced, then the game's going to continue. Now we have battles, which are kind of in between, right? They don't give you that 3 chapter, that longer term kind of thing, but they do sit on the battlefield. They do get you something straight up. And then they make you make gameplay decisions on whether you'd like to dedicate resources to transforming them or not. And that's like, I like each of these steps. These are much more interesting than, I think battles are more interesting than Planeswalkers, not from a card type perspective. Like Planeswalkers are definitely more exciting, more iconic. They hold a different place in the game as a whole. But just from straight up, if I'm going to play limited, I'd much rather play a set that had a bunch of battles than one that had a bunch of Planeswalkers.
Yeah, I think that they were very cognizant of, we don't want to introduce battles and have every game that involves a battle rotate around them, because that's not compatible with, we're going to put 36 battles in the set.
Right.
You can't, or you shouldn't rather, can't say can't, you can do whatever you want. You shouldn't put 36 battles in a set and make it so the vast majority of them are completely, dominant in terms of like the game is all about them. That said, design does matter, and when it comes to a new set where we see some battles, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there were some that were very good in aggressive decks.
Yeah. Seirko, I have a kind of a weird question, and I don't know if this came up in your research for the article or anything like that, but I remember thinking at the beginning of the format that the format would be slower by virtue of the fact that battles were here. Like if you take a normal format, it ends on game 8 or 9 or whatever, and then you just throw in 36 battles or whatever, some percentage of people are going to be taking the time to attack those battles, and that would theoretically slow down the game a little bit. Not make it less inevitable, but just take a turn off or whatever to attack battles. Is that true? Because I know that when we've looked at the speed of the format, it's definitely slower than the prior format, but it's not slow. Like this isn't this isn't Strixhaven or something like that.
Yeah, so I didn't look at this specific question because it's really hard to say it's slower than what. Because I mean, obviously, the best way to compare is it slower if you would remove the battle slot from the draft in this format and replace it with the random and common. So the only thing that you can sort of test it is the thing that I showed you on the that I was talking about on the other graph. That yes, if you play a lot of battles, you win slower. So like it basically putting a couple of battles in your deck slows you down by like 0.3 turns in general to win. But on the other hand, if you have multiple battles, you also lose quicker. So because sometimes you have the situation when you don't impact the board sufficiently, you're going to lose quicker. And those things sort of counterbalance themselves when the speed of the format sort of stays in the same point, because it will take you longer to win. It will take you faster to lose. In the end, the average game speed is going to be the same.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Another archetype that we wanted to talk about. 5-color.
5 colors. Oh wait, just before we move on from the battles, there is also one thing that I probably should have mentioned, like from a general trend, and obviously that's going to slightly vary from archetype to archetype, but there is definitely a negative link between the deck win rate and the number of battles in the deck. So decks with 0 battles, 56% win rate. You put 1, 55.5, 2, 54 and 54.4, 3, 54. 4, 53, 5, 51, and then it drops below 50. So there is that. That, of course, is somewhat impacted by the fact that, super aggressive decks that have a high win rate like Azorius will tend to have fewer battles.
Whoa, but that's huge. Like, that's a big deal, right? Like,
it is a big deal, but
is
then
the headline battles suck?
No, but that's literally what I write in my article. And I write, from this graph, you might conclude that battles suck. And then I go deeper into those colors. And, for example, Black-Red is the archetype that has actually the highest win rate when you have more battles for some reason, because it has a couple of good...
Probably a lot of Invasion of Asgols.
probably that, but also I think that a couple of other ones. If you have already a bunch of Invasions of Asgol, you might actually want to play Invasion of Regatha on top of that, because that allows you to flip your Invasion of Asgol quite easily and is on plan with your deck. But actually, this result that I showed you is mainly driven by those white decks. And when you remove the white decks from the equation, you see that the win rate stays more or less the same when you add the battles, because blue-black is fine with battles, blue-green is fine with battles, black-green is fine with battles, Izzet is sort of fine with battles, and red-green is okay-ish with battles. So
when you say fine with, do you mean...
It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how many you put. It's just like you probably want to put the quality ones, and that's more important to know which ones are the quality ones. But a blue-green deck with 0 battles and with 3-4 battles is going to perform more or less the same on average.
So as usual, you can't take a sweeping generalization from the data. You can, you can notice trend, but you have to be willing to say, well, there's a reason behind this. And if you have that knowledge of understanding, in this case, fairly straightforwardly, what archetypes and what types of decks want battles, can take advantage of them, and can use them as just good cards in their deck, versus which ones knock them off of their primary game plan enough to affect their win percent in a significantly negative way. If you know that, which you do now because you've been listening, then battles will absolutely fit in and you'll be good. Where if you looked at the headline, which, by the way, I kind of have to name this episode, Do Battles Actually Suck with Sierkovitz, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Embrace the clickbait. I mean, I know that's your strategy on the watch channel.
Actually, Luis, can you give me a, for the YouTube channel? Yeah.
Wait, shouldn't it be the tick bait in the watch channel?
Oh, my God.
Oh. He's been saving that one up.
Oh, no. Why me? But yeah, that to me is a really classic great way to interpret data, right? For us to not jump to the obvious conclusion, right? But instead to dig one level deeper where it's practical, right? Where you can actually walk away from this is one thing that one of the reasons I love having you on the show, so often, Sierkovitz, is being an interpreter of this is just as important as the data that we get, right? Because you absolutely can take good data and make very bad conclusions from it that will actually affect your win rate in a negative way. I don't believe so, but it's only because
out here using data for their own ends.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Trust me, I read a lot of people on Twitter that allegedly do their own research, and the conclusions are not always.
Look, we're just asking questions over here.
Yeah, we're just asking. Yeah, prove me wrong or whatever. Change my mind.
Yeah, even in the article I did, I stopped at the level of color pair. But I'm pretty sure that if you really wanted to master the format and know ins and outs of it, you could go deeper into the white-blue and then find that there are some white-blue decks that actually want to actively play battles because they are the controlling versions of the white-blue, and they come once every blue moon, but they do exist, and then you might want to play some battles. You might want to play the Battle of Dominaria and then control the board, and then maybe with a couple of flyers, take down the Battle of Dominaria, get the Sarah Angel, and finish the game through that. I'm pretty sure that they exist. It's just that the most dominant version of playing white-blue is going to be aggro tempo, and that's what the data suggests. But if you would go deeper even into that, but no one has time to, you will find that there are some exceptions from that rule.
Luis, I'm curious, does this type of stuff come up in the limited meeting? Like, this to me would be very useful if I had done drafts but didn't really feel like I had a super strong hold. If somebody would say, here's the deal with battles, right? Broad strokes, if you're a white aggressive deck, they don't have time for them. You don't, this might come up, right, of course, on like a card by card inspection, but does the bigger picture show up where you guys, because that was much earlier in the format, we didn't have Sierkovitz's article out and all that kind of stuff. Do those type of things come up where you can make some conclusions like that?
We more handle that on kind of a card by card basis. Mm-hmm. But you kind of naturally get that because when you look at white blue, like Battle of Xerix was not one we were super high on.
And that's a big red flag,
and
right?
And that kind of shows you that this isn't exactly the battles that go into this that you could plausibly play in this deck aren't that good, so therefore battles just aren't that good in this kind of deck is a natural conclusion you would come from that. One thing that is useful now that we talked about how most white blue decks are knights, but there's room for other ones, is when there's a significant divergent archetype within a color pair, it's good to talk about that, which is sometimes white blue Wrath control is a thing that comes together, and not. Again, I've used this analogy so many times. Preparing for limited isn't deciding which deck you're going to draft ahead of time. That's just not the best way to do it. But what it is knowing what the possibilities are so that when you do get the opportunity to draft this deck, you got a 5th pick Wrath, it's 6th pick, you got an Elspeth Smite, and you're like, wait, I can take this Artistic Refusal. I can be white-blue kind of controlling. Knowing that exists and how that works is what you need to have.
Yeah, for sure. That is certainly the best prepared players. I would describe them in the way that you just did. And they're almost always the ones who perform the best as well. Okay, Seirko, can we talk about 5-color now?
Go on then.
Tell me how great it is. Just lavish
in your hands, it must be amazing because you have all the invasions of Zendikar and none of the blind.
Invasion of Alara. I don't pass it, man. I know how to draft this deck.
Right. So where do you want to start? I started by basically analyzing which basics are being played. I looked at the 4 and 5 color decks. I hope you will excuse me that venture into the land of 4 color decks. Which
That's okay. I'm not
clearly
a purist.
Inferior, but it was just to get the sufficient sample size.
And what did you find?
Well, I found that 90% of them play a forest. 89% of them play an island. 86% of them play a swamp, and then 75% plains and 66% mountain.
God,
so it's basically
perfect.
Sultai is the core, and then obviously forests are average. There's average 5 forests per deck, 3 islands, 3 swamps, 2 plains, and 2 mountains. So it's basically green is the center of that deck, and that's and Sultai is the thing that you want to be doing basically, and then maybe add a couple of bombs or a couple of multicolor cards. But then I thought, okay, so 5-color decks, we know that fixing is important, but I don't remember anyone doing like a proper analysis of the fixing. And I split it into sort of 2 parts, and one of them had actually results that were sort of surprising, but then I managed to rationalize them afterwards, and it all makes sense now. Because I checked, does the win rate change if you have more dual lands? And I tested between 0 and 8 of the dual lands in the deck, because that's the only land fixing that you have available in this format. And I found there's absolutely no improvement. Like the decks with 0 lands were winning more or less the same as the ones with 5 or 8 dual lands.
That's crazy.
But then I thought about it, and he said, dual lands in this format are relatively high picks, so you need to sacrifice actual cards to get them. And in the end, dual lands are great when you're playing 3 colors to fix you to play 3 colors, but they're not so great in fixing you to 5 colors because you're still on the whim of drawing the right combination of those lands. You slightly increase the chance of hitting the right colors, but you're not all but guaranteeing it. So actually, in a set like Kaldheim, drafting those dual lands had an additional benefit because you had snow synergies. But here you don't have any. I mean, you gain a couple of life. That's basically it. So then I looked at the other fixing cards, and by other fixing cards, I specifically mean Skittering Surveyor, Blighted Burgeoning, and the Flywheel Racer. And then there are all the other 5. The Invasion of Zendikar was also on that list. I basically put all those things that fix you for 5 colors. It included Ren and Realmbreaker, but that probably is such a small, tiny amount of the data that it doesn't really matter. But there I saw actually a trend that if you had 0 of those cards, your win rate was 50. And if you have 1, it was 52. And then it was 53 when you had 2 or 3 of them. So yes, if you play 5 colors, you want to have this 5-color fixing more than you need the lands. So I would... My advice from that was that, of course, pick the lands because they will always improve it, but don't prioritize them. Pick them opportunistically when you are having a pack where you have nothing like really good in the pack and you see a dual land that will be there. Do pick it. And of course, after that, there comes the prioritization of those lands. And in this format, it seems to be that Sultai lands are the most prized. So you want that you cover about 2 of your core 3 colors. And then the next group of them is the lands that touch at least one of the Sultai colors. So, your green-red, your blue-white lands. And then last is the wind-swept crag, I want to say. The Boros one. And that one is actively pretty bad because it doesn't help you casting your main card. So sometimes you draw it, and yes, you fixed your accessory colors, but that doesn't allow you to cast your pest creature because you don't have green, and that's your problem. So you definitely want your dual lands to touch on your Sultai colors, and then the touching ones, the green ones, are the most important ones on within that group. So that's the basic conclusion that I have.
Okay, so but you really do, but cards like Blighted Burgeoning,
yes,
are much more important.
Yes, and then then basically I looked at which cards are mostly played, and it's funny, but because within the 15 cards that are most played cards in 5-color decks, 9 of the top 15 cards by play rate are the dual lands, and then the other 6 are Blighted Burgeoning, Skittering Surveyor, Overgrown Pest, Portent Tracker, Invasion of Zendikar, and the only non-fixing card, although it sort of can fix, Wary Thespian. These are the top play cards in the 5 colors. So people, when they draft 5 colors, they treat their fixing seriously. But then I decided to do a slightly different metric than I normally do. So normally I would calculate win rate and do that. In this one, because I had like 33,000 sample size, I decided to...
Is that large or small?
That's smallish for them.
Okay.
I mean, often I will look at 300,000, 600,000 game data sets when I'm looking at some questions. But it's large enough. But because those 5-color decks are both very similar, but also very different. Because on the one hand, they will have like very common features, but because they take from the whole pool of all the cards in the format, there will be much diversity between them. I decided to do a weird analysis, and I looked at each card, and I looked at the win rates of decks that have this card in them, and the win rate of decks that don't have them within the 4 and 5-color decks.
Okay.
And then I decided to look at the different levels of cards. So first I looked at the cards that are very commonly played. So the ones that are in over 10% of those 5-color decks. And then basically tried to find the ones that have the highest win rate when they are in the deck, and the decks that don't have it have lower win rate. And weirdly, the top card on that is Tandem Takedown, the 3-mana fight spell. Yeah, and I think I figured out why, sort of. So the problem of the 5-color deck is that very often you need to be heavy green because you need the fixing, and that's mainly in green, and that will be your base color. But then the problem becomes that because you're doing all the 5 colors, if your interaction is black, or if your interaction is red, or if your interaction is blue, you will be so stuck on the green that you sometimes will not have the mana for the early interaction.
Makes sense.
And actually, when you're playing things like the what's the name, Wary Thespian that has 3 power, that Tandem Takedown will kill most of the things quite early. And also, one of the other cards in that best cards in terms of the win rate of the decks that have it and don't have it is also Cosmic Hunger, another green removal spell. So I think that it's not a bad idea to have your early removal suite in the same color as your main color in those 5-color decks, which will be most of the time green. You have also some other removal in those cards. Merciless Repurposing is on it, even though it costs 2 black. But that's a card you deal with later bombs, basically, and then it's good because it just gives you so much value. Another card that is like really, really good, decks that have it are really, really good, Captive Weird. Because that's another thing, that your decks will be mainly green and blue, and then you can play it on turn 1, and it's great on stopping the early aggression. Then you flip it and you get like loads of value. Invasion of Amonkhet is good because that card is just busted. And then we go like the 4th best card when you use this metric that I introduced for this purpose is Seed of Hope.
Oh wow, man! I have really missed the boat on Seed of Hope.
Yeah, so decks with Seed of Hope do really well because probably it's also that it might be to some extent that usually a highly invested and really good player recognized this card, and therefore the win rate is going to be higher just because the players that play it are slightly better. Maybe not. It doesn't give that much of a value.
Does anybody else want this card either?
I don't think many people want it.
Green white doesn't want it. Green blue maybe.
Green blue maybe. Yeah, because then you might play.
But who the heck plays just green blue? Right? If you're going to play green blue, let's get some white, some red, some black. Like, let's do this, you know?
I sometimes do. And
come on.
I sometimes do, but
you need to think bigger, Seirko, bigger.
Most of the time, I add black. I'm currently 21-2 with my Sultai decks in this format. So
I like that. Yeah,
it does work on occasions. Then you have like Halo Forager. That's another value package. And the card that I really found very surprising, Converter Beast. That's decks with 5-color decks with Converter Beast do 2.5 percentage points better than the decks without it, which is quite a decent number. And then when you look down to that list, you also will find Tangled Skyline and Elvish Vatkeeper. And I think that there is a case of playing the sort of 5-color that if you don't hit on those big bombs, maybe you have like 1 or 2. You can actually get quite far in those 5-color decks by having like a very good incubate package. You can actually, if you're lucky, you can get the Norn's Inquisitor and flip them for extra value. You can have your Omen Hawker and then discount the costs of those things. But I did a specific analysis of that one, and basically the more incubate enablers you have, the higher the win rate. So like 5-color decks with like 7 incubate enablers who had like 55% win rate compared to 49% with 0 enablers. That of course when you have 0 enablers, you don't have Blighted Burgeoning, which is a very important card for the deck. But because you have Blighted Burgeonings and you want to play them, you actively want cards that also improve the Incubate token synergies, because you will have those 2/2s lying around from your Blighted Burgeonings.
Right.
And a couple of other cards that are good in there that might be interesting. I think that Emoti is still slightly undervalued as a card, and that
it's a good card.
Emoti do pretty well. And Streetwise Negotiator, that card is super important, because that not only it allows you to survive to the later game when you should be good, but also in some games you would just play it on turn 2 and you start slamming and the opponent is on the back foot already. And that's like, if you're playing a 5-color deck and you manage to put the opponent in the back foot early in the game, you're in a really good position to win that game, because their late game is not going to be better than yours, I'm assuming.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. The cross-section that I pick up off of it is a combination of fixing raw power, especially late game cards like Halo Forger and Emoti and stuff that are, we'll call them finishers, whatever, however you want to put it. And then critically early interaction, either in the form of cheap creatures that can block, like the 3/1 or the weird, or removal spells that are cheap.
Yeah, on this package of the early creatures, there's a Preying Champion and Herbology Instructor. Both of them are really excellent in those decks in terms of like Herbology Instructor giving you the life cushion, later threatening to be a removal, and Preying Champion obviously is just busted.
The goat, yeah.
And then, so then you go to the cards that are not so good and are commonly played. And I think that the one that definitely drops the win rate is Omnath, Locus of All. Decks with Omnath have like 3.6 percentage point lower win rate than the decks without it.
Luis was all over. I didn't like it. Luis was like, that card just kind of sucks.
But also on that list is Invasion of Alara.
The best card.
Say it ain't so.
But I think that there are good decks for Invasion of Alara, but I think that too many people are just like first picking it and trying to build around it because it's a funny meme.
Yeah.
And this card should be more like, okay, I'm in a 5-color and I'm going to be rewarded in some of those drafts by getting a late Invasion of Alara, and that's the kind of way of.
Have you considered a widget for 17 lands for the client? When the draft starts, you can click the "I'm not trying." I'm memeing.
Oh, you can flag a pick as this doesn't count. I love that.
Yeah, just so we know, just so we don't get unfairly docked when we're memeing.
I'm sure the guys will be very excited on getting extra work to be done. They're struggling to find things to do currently.
Well, in Luis's case, can we flag accounts?
I don't know, because the LSVs are just so plentiful in the arena that we don't know which ones.
Yeah. He does represent a big part of the data set for sure.
First of all, we are Legion. Second of all, most of my drafts actually don't get logged on 17 lands these days. I just play on my phone most of the time.
That's the thing. I was thinking about inviting you to get your data analyzed by me, but then I thought, he's just playing on the toilet on the phone, and there's never any logs. If there are logs, I don't want to see them.
Oh my God! That's just way too. Do you have anything else you want to say about 5-color decks?
Anything at all? Anything at all?
Oh my God!
Apart from the cards that are played over 10% of the decks, because these are obviously the most of them are going to be common and are common. Yeah. I looked at the cards that are played like between 5 and 10%, which will be probably when you're going to get your rares. And I just want to see which rares are going to improve the win rate the most. And guess what? Sunfall is the one that improves the deck the most.
Oh, say it ain't so.
No, but the second one is Ancient Imperiosaur, which may be a bit more surprising.
Is that the Convoke?
That's the Convoked Massive Dinosaur.
Okay. Card is great.
And then you have like the Breach and Etali, because why not? These cards are good. But what was interesting for me to see is that Talia and the Gitrog Monster, Zergo and Ujatai, Borborygmus and Fibblethip, all those cards are there on the list. And I think that those 3-color busted rares are actually better payoffs for being in 5 colors than, the Invasions of Alara, because they still will go quite late because not many people are able to cast them. And they're really, really powerful. And I think that all 3 of them are improving the deck by like 3-4 percentage points.
Really? I'm surprised by that. Okay.
Compared to the decks that don't have them. And then you have like Glistening Dawns, Chrome Host, Seed Shark, Hidetsugu, Glissa, the expected ones. And there are only two uncommons that make this list of the cards that are not commonly played but have a good improvement on how the deck is working. And that's Scornblade Berserker. I think maybe underappreciated as a thing that brings you to the late game, because it will absorb some damage. It will gain you like 3-4 life, and it will net you a card most likely. And in some situations, it will make your blocker even a better blocker. So imagine like playing a turn 1, a 1/3, and then putting a counter on it, and still having mana to chomp and sacrifice the Scornblade Berserker. And the other uncommon that was underplayed but had really good results was Norn's Inquisitor. And that's what I told you, that I think that there are those 5-color decks that will heavily lean on this incubate and maybe transform synergies, and Northern Inquisitor is just excellent in those decks.
Yeah, you mentioned Blighted Burgeoning being there.
Yeah, but
it just creates a bunch of. You'll often just have a incubator token just laying around, and Inquisitor helps.
But it works equally well with Captive Weird or with the 2/1 flying thing that turns into a 3/5 evolution, and then 3/5 flyer is just like impossible to kill in this format, especially, and it nets you a card. So yeah. So yeah, that's this, and then the rest. I think that Atris is another card that may be underappreciated by people in terms of how good it is in this decks. Because in most decks, when you play Atris in the blue-black, drawing 2 lands may be not so appealing when you pick the inevitable 2-land pile from Atris. But in this 5-color strategy, actually picking 2 lands is probably good for you, because any land will fix you for something there at a certain stage. So that's, I think, a card that. And that was a very weird one. I think Polucrinus is doing very well in those decks. And when you think about GGG, casting cost in the 5-color is maybe not so great.
Yeah.
But when you're good in fixing, you're also good to fix for your 3rd green mana if you want to. So
if you're base green, you can get a 3rd green pretty easy. Yeah.
And if you manage to flip this thing, then you probably won. So that's
okay. So in conclusion, 5-color best archetype in the format. Is that?
I think that you shouldn't be playing Magic only to win. You should also be playing it to have fun. And I think that in terms of the fun factor, 5-color is an excellent strategy. Also, it's a very good for if you're like an intermediate or maybe beginner player. It's a good format to dip your toes in 5-color decks and try to draft them and figure out how they're working and maybe learn something, level up a bit. But if you want to be strictly winning, I think that 2-color decks are going to have higher win rate on average. But what's the point?
Yeah, so maybe we'll call it the best off the record deck. Like that's the checkbox. I don't want this deck to be on the record. Like, we can chat, but you can't put this in the newspaper.
I can't agree with that. Best of the record decks are obviously Yorion as a companion decks.
No, Luis likes those as being good, like actually good.
I think I guess I'm curious what the stats say, but I have found a decent amount of success with Yorion as a companion. I think as the format has gone further, some of the effects that you've talked about previously come into play, where people are picking the right cards more, you're getting fewer playables, your decks get a little less good. I could be willing to believe that starts to less become the case. But I've had a couple decks where I companion Yorion, and it felt good to do so.
Oh, that's the deck where I want to have my battles and rebuy the ETBs. That's just like. And then just flip them with the Yorion himself. So themselves? I don't know.
I don't know. It's a snake, like a serpent snake something. So.
So yeah, I mean, I don't have the data for companions, unfortunately. I mean, it only can be taken out from the replay data, and I'm planning to get it once the replay data is going to be out there, and then do some analysis. I'm still skeptical about Yorion. Being
actually worth it,
good as a companion, but I mean, LSV is the 60 card format specialist on this podcast, I guess.
Sure.
That's good. Okay, well, why don't we wrap it up here? We've been going for quite a while. Did you have anything else that you wanted to hit on before we take off, Seirko?
Let
me ask. I'll frame it for you.
Okay.
Is this an all-timer for you?
It's a great format. It's not as good as Ikoria,
but it's like number 2?
But it's not far. It's not far. It's up there with Kaldheim, yeah.
Okay, so you just named 2 other formats. Do you think those other 2 formats are better than this one? Luis has it as, high on his all-time list.
For me, it's like tied with Kaldheim in terms of the best format I played so far, and I restarted my playing on Dominaria, so that's the time frame that I'm judging it. And I think it would be Ikoria, then like Ikoria with old companion rule number 1, Ikoria with new companion rule number 2, and then this thing and the Kaldheim Execu as third. Yeah.
All right, so you're just a big 5-color companion guy, I guess.
Oh, no, I just love companion drafts because it's just so much fun to play around it, and especially in the set designed to be doing that.
Yeah,
so yeah,
for sure. What have you been working on lately? Where can people find you? Are you guys still doing the archetypist and that stuff?
Oh, I can't be talking about it because it's all under wraps. But there's going to be an archetypist update hopefully soon. I am supposed to be working on that, but I don't have time because I get invited as guest to other podcasts, and then I lose my time on those things.
How dare you?
I can tell you that Archetypist is going to be hopefully much more available soon, and it's going to be maybe updated very regularly and without my involvement, apart from me giving a blessing to the mods behind it. That's what I can tell about it.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm a big fan of 17 Lands, so my main message to people is to support them because it costs a lot for them to run it, and it would be nice to have that tool still available because otherwise I won't be invited here because my usefulness is only as big as the data. So
no, we like you. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Before maybe, but unfortunately your infectious personality has gotten to both Luis and I, and we'd have you back on regardless, just for the fun. But that's great.
If you're looking for my infectious personality, I do my sort of weekly articles on mtgazone.com, and I do my weekly seminar magic numbers on the data, different topics. You'll find, all the things, I hope, in the show notes of the 2 articles that we were talking about. You probably want to read them if you're looking through this episode. And I sometimes stream on Twitch, and I have my Twitter, which is probably where you can find me the easiest and ask me some questions or whatever.
Okay, yeah, I'll put a link to your Twitter in there, and they can find your stream and your YouTube there, and then I'll put a link to the 2 articles that we talked about specifically in the show this week as well. Seirko, thanks so much for coming on. It's always a great pleasure to hear your thoughts on a format.
My pleasure as well.
If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. Like I said, every episode of the show, plus the links in the front to stuff like Luis's stream that I mentioned. And yes, if you're not like a regular Twitch viewer, you can watch prior streams. Like you can go there and watch his streams from the past week, and you can even see the chat go by as it did in real time. And that'll give you an idea of what nonsense ensued. I highly recommend the one that Luis mentioned that starts off with him and BK wearing ponchos as they draft Storm. And then it even gets joined by Patrick Sullivan, who just takes it to another level. The whole stream was fun, but it really kicked into gear with all 3 of you goofballs yelling at your opponents and trying to draft funny Storm decks and all that. So anyway, all of that's at lrcast.com. And with that, we'll see you next week.
So I know Marshall knows this. Sierkovitz, are you familiar with the bad idea draft?
No.
Oh, I'm sure. Once I explain it, I'm sure you'll know. Have you ever you're not sure if you should join another draft? It's 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
Join the draft. Actually, I don't know what time you go to bed. For me, if I join it at 10:30 at night, that actually almost qualifies. But at the Pro Tour, the bad idea draft's closer to 1 a.m. We really shouldn't do another team draft. Yet here we are. I think one of the best bad idea drafts I ever had was actually on stream. I was streaming. Me, Marshall, and Paul Cheon were set to record limited resources, and this is this is where we had made the plan of we're going to record after I'm done streaming. So I'm streaming and Paul and Marshall are watching the stream. They're among the audience. And at this point, I was like, okay, they're waiting on me, but I had joined a draft. I was mid-draft, and they're like, yeah, that's fine. Just finish this draft. Not a big deal. And then the draft was going terribly. I was drafting Storm. It was awful. It wasn't coming close to coming together. And I joked around. I'm like, well, if I 3-0 this draft, do I get to draft again? And Paul and Marshall were both like, yeah, sure. Okay, buddy, whatever you want.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
It was Storm with no win condition. It just really wasn't a functional deck. I got a pack 3 15th pick Kiki Jiki. And I had one Zealous Conscript to go with it. And, through twists and turns, including my opponent, who, by the way, my opponent was named Ellis V. Sucks. They're a player who plays on Magic Online and Arena. Though I guess on Arena, maybe there's someone else, who knows. They commit a game-losing error against me to give me a chance. They just completely threw it all away. And I ended up, through the skin of my teeth, through the grace of my opponents making misplays, 3-0ing the bad idea draft. And then because we had a deal, I got to draft again. The stream was going nuts. Everyone wanted me to draft again because, you're watching the stream. You don't want it to end. And Paul and Marshall are just sitting there tilted beyond belief because they couldn't record the podcast until I was done with now another draft on top of the one I already probably shouldn't have joined. That's a bad idea draft because not only did I get punished, I got to even more punish, two friends of mine, which you might wonder why I'd want to do that.
Says a lot about you.